Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Cheryl Rosenberg, Assistant Director in the Career Center, and today we're talking about careers in social impact, nonprofits, and education. We have a great group of guests we're talking to today, so I'm eager to get into the questions and hear what everyone has to say. Just before we do that, a few housekeeping things. For those of you who pre-registered for today's event, we did collect your questions and we'll be incorporating those into our talk today. And I'm going to ask you to stay muted throughout the event and invite you to interact and type questions in the chat box. John Stanford, Assistant Director of the Employer Relations team, is also on the call today helping with some tech logistics, and he'll be keeping track of the chat box and asking the questions that you type there during the Q&A portion at the end. And we are recording this event today, so you can find it on our YouTube channel later. And you can always reach out to me. I'll share my contact information at the end if there's anything you'd like to follow up about. So without further ado, I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. And go ahead and just introduce yourself. Let us know your name, if you're a Tufts alumni, your current organization and position, and a little brief summary of what you do.
Hi, sure. Hi, my name is Vladimir Casseus. I'm a school psychologist for the Boston Public School District, and I'm actually an alum of Tufts. I graduated the school psychology program in 2016. So currently, I work at two high schools in Boston, the EMK, Academy for Health Careers, and English High School. And what I do on a typical day is a series of psychoeducational assessments. So that'll be sort of looking at students' cognitive skills, their academic skills, and also sort of looking at their social emotional well-being and determining what services they might need in order to access the curriculum to their best ability. And I just finished my 4th school year, so I'll be going to my 5th year as a school psychologist.
Great, thank you. Tatiana, let's get an introduction from you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tatiana. I'm also a Jumbo alum. So I graduated in 2015 through the Elliott Pearson School, so majored in child development. And for me, that was really because I've always been passionate about positive outcomes for children and family health. So that was my concentration back when I was at Tufts. And so that's taken me into a career in direct service, fundraising, and now working for a quasi-public in the nonprofit sector. So been around the block, a bunch of different roles. So for me right now, I work for Commonwealth Corporation, which is a quasi-public, as a program manager. And really, on paper, what I do is government contracting, but in practice, what that means for me is that there's a pool of money that's specifically meant to go to training organizations that allow people to go from entry-level jobs into like self-sustaining, like thriving careerhood. So say you're working at your local stop and shop, you're an essential worker and you want to perhaps become a pharmacy technician, or maybe you want to get into the construction industry, or maybe you want to get a specialized driving license. So really you need to get connected to a training program. So something that I get excited for is reviewing applications and then, going through the process of working with the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development on approving, partnerships with local career centers, with local training providers to get folks from, one point in their jobs to another point in their careers. And, that's mainly because I don't think you can be a healthy family in America if you're not making a livable wage. So that's where I chime in. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Tatiana. Paul, let's go to you.
Perfect, thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Riley. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm unfortunately not a Tufts alum. I wish I were. It's a great institution. My wife did the Institute for Nonprofit Practice, so that'll be my claim to Tufts. My role at City Year is Regional Recruitment Manager, working with young people who are interested in our AmeriCorps opportunity. We are a nonprofit organization that recruits 18 to 25-year-olds to serve full-time on teams in schools across the country, working with students, providing attendance coaching, social emotional skill development, and academic support. something I did right after college, 2 years of national service. So my role now is kind of that HR type of role, working with young people who might be interested, telling them about the program, helping them see how it might fit, and then walking them through the application process and understanding not just the work we do, but also the context, right? The systems of oppression that affect communities across the country, especially communities of color. I think it's the major part of our work at City Year. So excited to be here and talk with all of you today.
Thanks, Paul. And last but not least, Lizzie.
Hey everyone, great to meet you. I'm Lizzie. I'm also not a Tufts alumni, unfortunately, but excited to be here speaking with you all today. I work at Idealist, which if you're not familiar, we like internally call ourselves sort of like the Indeed of the nonprofit world. So we have like usually 3,000-ish, 4,000-ish nonprofit jobs posted at a time. We work with like 130,000 different nonprofits, and in my role there, I'm the marketing coordinator. So I basically just try to find creative ways of showcasing the orgs that we work with and the jobs that are online. So I post on our social media, I write our newsletter, and yeah, I'm just trying to really showcase the cool work that all these cool nonprofits are doing and to create a community around that. So excited to be here today. Thank you for organizing it, everyone.
Great group. Thanks everyone for being here. While we're on the topic of talking what you all do, a lot of students actually wrote in with this question. We talk a lot about planning career journeys in the Career Center at Tufts and how things are going to be a little twisty and turny and sometimes unplanned. We might not end up in the one exact thing we thought. And so it would be great to actually hear from each of you just a little more about your career path, maybe where you thought you'd end up, how you got from college to where you are now, maybe some of the experiences that have been really meaningful in shaping your journey along the way.
Okay, Cheryl, so just something light, something very light.
I know that's a big hefty question. Let me just break it down and say, how about maybe one unexpected piece of your career journey that has been meaningful in getting you to where you are today?
I wanted to hop right in because I was just on a similar call to this one, and I heard someone describe, instead of the career ladder, describe it as the career lattice, because we are all moving and shifting in a lot of different ways. I think something that I face, I'm 27, so I'm usually the youngest person or one of the youngest people in the room, just in the workforce development world. And I have to own that. I have to own that I deserve to be in that space. But I also have to acknowledge that I am standing in a room with 20 plus years experience. So I think for me, one of the most pivotal moves in my lattice work over here has been to acknowledge what your current circumstance gives you. So I worked 2 part-time jobs when I was at Tufts. Shout outs to the athletics department and shout outs to Tufts Conference and Event Services. So I worked an admin job, and then I was a lifeguard for all the 4 years that I was on campus. And you can take so much from an admin job. Showing up to work on time, showing that you can follow direction, that you can follow through. That admin experience is what helped me leap into my first job after college, which I was in a development fundraising operation in the nonprofit sector. So any opportunity that you have, definitely seize it, and use that. Always be thinking about what your pivot point is going to be, especially when you're changing either sectors or changing careers, because you want to show people this is what I can do, and then this is why I can do what you want me to do because of what I learned. So just being agile, acknowledging the skills that you do have and your points of growth. I took 2 part-time jobs, and now I've been a lifeguard for 10 years. I work for sorry guys, I work for Harvard Aquatics Department now. But even with my full-time job, I still keep a side hustle. So just acknowledging the skills that you have, keeping them fresh, keeping them sharp, that's been really great on my journey.
I think for me, the advice I would give to students at this point is really going after what you're really passionate about. But not only what you're passionate about, but also areas that you feel like you have some some good skills in. Because I know for me, I graduated from Holy Cross undergrad, but while I was there, I ended up switching majors from chemistry pre-med to psychology, because I started off thinking, you know what, I'm going to be a pharmacist one day, so let me get this pre-med stuff out of the way. That didn't end up too well. That was a whole thing where I was really like down on myself about it. But then bouncing back and going into psychology and really just diving into a lot of the topics that I seemed to really enjoy at the time was probably one of the best decisions I made. And then even after college, I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And Paul, I actually was a City Year alum from 2012 to 2013. And that year was a really defining year for me, because I realized, you know what, I don't really want to be a teacher, but I do want to do something where I can still be in the schools and still work with students in sort of like a small group kind of one-on-one kind of situation. And that's how I got into school psychology. So it's really, I think my journey is about really thinking about what's that thing that you feel like you're super passionate about and don't mind waking up at 5, 6 a.m. to go and do. So I think for the students that are in college now, they really want to think about, you know what, I have to think about what are some things that I feel like I want to do each and every day and feel energized about.
If I could jump in. Always great to see a fellow City Year alum. I think, so I graduated from college in 2009. And one of the lines I've been using the past few months is like, I was from that cohort of people that graduated the last time the economy was in terrible turmoil. And I thankfully didn't have a pandemic at the same time, but I think it's important to know that in those opportunities, like I think one of the reasons I love recruiting at Tufts is y'all are bringing such a mindfulness and a thoughtfulness and solid experience. And so that's one thing like to know you have in your corner. And I know I'm a little biased as an employee at City Year, but I said this for the 10 years I've been connected to the organization, but not on the staff. Like I think a year of service with any program is a really powerful transformational experience. I think taking on something like that is really cool. So talking about my path, right? Like that's built a foundation for me. I think it's not the path for everybody, but knowing that the first thing you do out of school is not going to be the be all and end all of what your life is. But I think to Tatiana's point, a little bit of what Vladimir was saying, right? Use that opportunity to reflect on what do you like about it? What is something you don't like about it? And consistently ask those questions of yourself as you go along your journey, because there's going to be roles and positions that you're in that you don't really like, right? My role as a development fundraising operations, like I didn't like being behind a computer. I love systems. Now as a recruiter, I get the best of both worlds, right? Getting to talk to human beings, but also using the Salesforce dashboard to track progress and things. And that's going to set me up for skills down the line, right? And I think that's a really powerful thing to know, that you're not going to be able to anticipate what is down the line in 10 years, the people you'll meet who will set you on different paths, the jobs, the global geopolitical situations. But I think to know what about you makes you you and what drives you, and to keep seeking a clear answer to that question.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of echo on what Paul is saying, I had a similar experience. I think, so I'm 25, I actually graduated in 2017, so I'm still, I guess, early-ish career, but I think even in those 3 years since I graduated, just being really open to sort of where my career would take me, I think it's been really important, because, I definitely am on sort of a different track than I expected. Like I actually interned with like the Austin Symphony Orchestra. I'm from Texas and worked with the Performing Arts Center in Texas too. So when I graduated, I was like back in my small town, like living with my parents, feeling super annoyed to not have a job like after I graduated yet. I was like, oh my God, I failed, and then I got an opportunity to work for a classical music organization in New York, and they wanted me there like a month after I got the job offer. So I just said sure, and I just sort of made the leap, and then the job was not at all what I expected it to be. I think maybe some other panelists here have had that experience. You start, and sometimes it's not what you expected, or maybe it's not quite what you had hoped it had been. So I was like, oh, I don't actually want to work in classical music. I found it sort of, it's a little old school. It's like you have to kind of start when you're really young, and if you don't have a certain advantage, then it's really hard to get into. And most of my it's kind of in my opinion, it was a little bit of a stuffy field, right? So as like a 22-year-old, I was looking for maybe more excitement. So Then I went to theater, which was a little different, but still in the arts. And now I'm doing what I want to do, which is working with a lot of different organizations who have a lot of different causes. And so I think, yeah, for me, it's just been being open to changing my mind. I think not being so type A. I was definitely in college, like, you know, I have this internship, which leads me to this internship, which leads me to this job, and then I'm on track and my adulthood is figured out. And I think I just thought that's how everyone, you know, approached it. But I think that could be kind of limiting too. So I guess just like approaching every opportunity with an open mind, being sort of willing to be surprised, and then, you know, take a leap and enter a new field or make some kind of transition, because everything is helpful, right? Like even my background in the arts has helped me work with all kinds of different people and like work with small budgets and make things happen quickly. So kind of like everyone else has been saying here, you can take something from any job you've had, whether it's like, I was a grocery store bagger when I was 16 and I used some of those skills still, you know, so I'd say like every experience is helpful, and don't think of anything as a waste of time, because you'll be surprised at how it helps you out down the line too.
Great. Well, it's great to hear a little bit more about all of your different paths and the things that were unexpected, and also get some advice for everyone who's joined us. Let's shift a little now to the current context. So we've all been living in this virtual world, some of us working at home for a couple months now. I'm curious to hear what's one major way your organization has adapted in the recent months, either on a day-to-day level, so what each day looks like for you, or maybe it's something your work is doing in the community and how it's adapted its approach, or how it's being of service to folks.
Well, I think for BPS and along with a lot of school districts, it was a huge shift into virtual learning. So right around March, things started to change in terms of not being able to go to school in person. So right off the bat, BPS had a great response to sort of making sure that the learning was continuing, even though it was going to be virtual. So a lot of the teachers were able to set up Google Classrooms or other types of virtual platforms where their students can still connect with them. And for me specifically, as a school psychologist, a lot of my my role with the students is really doing those assessments, working with them one-on-one in person. So for me, it was a lot of like texting students, calling students, doing my own sort of Google Meet or Zoom meetings to give them their counseling services, and also working with my schools in terms of setting up student support teams where we can sort of connect weekly and figure out what students are still in need of sort of academic, behavioral, or emotional support while during the quarantine. So it was an interesting time, but it was also a great time to really sort of think about how we can adapt our work into the virtual realm as well.
Yeah, so we sit here, right, education focused. Most of our nearly all of our AmeriCorps members were working in schools and made similar pivots. I think as a staff member, one of the things I really appreciated was the quick response to everything that was going on, right? Being able to get, you know, employees to work from home, work remotely. City years, fiscal year ends on June 30th, and between mid-March and that day, we had 15 days of COVID time, paid time off that we could use either if we were sick, if we were taking care of someone else who were sick, or if we were just struggling to live in this situation, right? I think we have a lot of people who are parents, or and navigating that is terrifically difficult, to work from home, but also support your children who may be at any level of the development spectrum. And we have additional days for this new fiscal year. So that was a really, I think, symbolic, but also tangible, right? Of like how we can work differently in this space that, you know, between two and a half months, you can have 3 full weeks off if you needed throughout the time. And we've also coupled that with some kind of social justice time. I think I won't get into this now. I think it's an important point. Like we're at this confluence of 2 major changes in this country, and so we also were able to get time off to heal from that or to work in that space. So I think that's a really cool opportunity to be taken care of or supported through this difficult time.
Happy to chime in. So Commonwealth Corporation went fully remote especially at the beginning of, the quarantine. So we really, as a team, from our leadership team down, all looked at what we did and saw, well, what's possible. So we're all going to, work remotely, but then to see and make sure that everyone has, the tools needed. So whether that be, for me, I shifted my entire work system like from home. So like I'm one of those people, I'd been working on 2 monitors, and then to go from my 2 monitors and my modem set up at work to go home and I have like maybe a 12-inch MacBook, it was a very hard adjustment. A part of my job is like living in Excel sheets. And so when I can't, have that blown up much bigger for me to access, like that was a difficult thing for me. But as my company adjusted to everyone being remote, we had conversations about, okay, what does it look like for you to have the best workspace? Some people don't have desks. I pretty much was able to bring nearly all of my supplies from the office, like to my house. And so, I mean, you'd be surprised, like sitting at your kitchen chair for a couple weeks, like you start to really miss that office chair with like a little bit of cushion and spring to it, and make sure I had a makeshift desk. So like my shoulders were up here all the time. And I was like, oh man, I don't know why my neck is so sore. What's going on? But yeah, we adjusted like fully to remote work. And then because of the partnerships that we have with training vendors and career centers and all of that, and all that goes along with our partnerships, is something that was really, I think, interesting that I noted was, pretty much all organizations needed to put a halt to training, so it was like a halt to figure out what are we doing, and then an adjust and pivot. So what we've seen is a lot of hybrid models of learning. So certified nurse assistant training is done in partly through Red Cross. So like there haven't been able to be any testings happening because those are Red Cross administered. So like some portions have had to be on pause, but like didactic learning portions are able to be had over Zoom or Google or, WebEx, whatever platform. So seeing people adjust to make virtual learning accessible has been, I think, an amazing thing to point out, because what I think it has done is exposed how unaccommodating training and education has been for alternatively abled folks. How telling is it that, during a pandemic, everyone who could otherwise have been in an office is fully able to work remotely, right, to the best of their ability. So how telling that it took a pandemic for people to want to protect themselves when really everyone deserves those levels of protection. So I think that what's been inspiring has been to see how folks have really been able to acknowledge, well, what can be done remotely, and when you need more touch points, more face-to-face, including that as a part of the transition plan.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say something very similar. It's I've worked like 3 jobs since I graduated, and in all of them I don't know about all the other panelists, but I've definitely been sort of discouraged to work from home. It would be like, do it if you have to, but sort of what I was told is it's better for everyone if you're there in the office, right? So maybe there's some flexibility for some people, but yeah, I don't know. So I live in New York City, and I think the average commute here is like half an hour, but in my jobs, it's usually been a good like 45 minutes to an hour. And, sometimes there's like a snowstorm and you're just like, you have your umbrella to like guard against like the raining snow, and then you have your parka, and it's, not saying the weather is the biggest factor, but it's been pretty inflexible in my experience with working from home. But of course, it took a pandemic to show that, of course, we are totally able to. I think most people have a laptop, or there's like some money and a budget to sort of furnish like a little bit in home office. So actually, a lot of my staff is moving away from the city. That it surprised me, but like my boss is moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee, so she could afford, better able to afford rent and be near her parents. Several other people are actually moving out of the city too. So, and whereas before that was not even an option. So, not to say there hasn't been, I hesitate to say like a silver lining of the pandemic is, right? Because it's been so horrible, but I think it has really changed work in a big way that no one expected, and has shown us that there is a lot more accommodations that can be done. And, even when you're looking for jobs now, like people are willing to interview you. Like I was like, me getting an interview in Texas for a New York job was kind of unheard of, right? That doesn't happen. And now it's a little more accessible in that, there are more job opportunities too. And HR people, I've gone to other panels where they've said they've been more than willing to interview from all over the country. So yeah, I mean, it's weirdly like more of a sort of flexible, accommodating job market to go into right now. And so it's kind of an exciting opportunity in that way too.
Yeah. Lots of embracing of the remote work, that's for sure. I want to ask a quick question, maybe a brief answer for this one. Is there a skill for any of you that you really underestimated before that you're really relying on or grateful that you have now in this new work environment, whether it's your day-to-day or in serving your community?
I think for me, like building community virtually is such a critical skill. It's very easy to rely on that in-person water cooler conversation to like have information and relationships blossom. But to do that, and there's a lot of robust platforms to do it, Teams, Microsoft Teams we use, and those spaces to connect with people in times you don't need something from them, like the stuff you would do day to day. But that's something I'm continuing to work on and really I'm looking for.
Yeah, it really does make a big difference, huh?
I think being open-minded and flexible, I know that's two, but I think those two skills were skills that I felt like I really had to use during this time because with everything that was going on with COVID and the quarantine, you really had to find different ways and be open to different sort of ways to sort of continue to be productive, not only for yourself, but also for the people that you serve, the families and students that I served. So being able to meet them where they were at, regardless of how I felt about the situation or regardless if I felt like I had the means to do what I needed to do, but really trying to find ways to be flexible and sort of do my best to sort of give the people that I was working with the best of me that I could, regardless of the circumstances.
Now, I'm going to jump in with a question for Lizzie. Can you tell us some of the trends that your team at Idealist is seeing across the nonprofit sector right now?
Yeah, happy to. So like I mentioned, we're sort of like the Indeed of the nonprofit world. So I'd say a lot of, again, like 130-ish thousand nonprofits will post on us. So we have a pretty good read of like the industry right now. I'll like humble brag. And honestly, like after looking at the numbers that I pulled for this panel, it's really not as dramatic of an effect as even I expected. So like you guys would probably expect, and I have like my notes here, so I'm gonna pull percentages and just sound like a nerd, but like as you would probably expect, like April was probably the time of the most change in job posting. So, in April, jobs were down like 67% to what we had expected and what should have probably been there. So, honestly, like as a company at Idealist too, we weren't sure, like we thought that might be the beginning of a slide, and our revenue mostly comes from the job postings too. So it was sort of a scary time for the org as we think about how we can stay afloat and if we need to do layoffs. But, surprisingly, that was the worst month, and it's gotten a little better every month since April. So in the couple months since then, we're down like 44%. So still significant, but not quite 67-70% are worse like we expected. And what's actually kind of cool about it is the jobs that were hardest hit are actually recovering the fastest. So also sort of an unexpected silver lining there. So for example, like jobs in like community outreach, fundraising, social media, and teaching had like the biggest decline in jobs, but are also like rebounding much faster than anything else. And same with entry-level jobs as well. So those are also on the up and up. So that's exciting to see. So we're expecting jobs to be back to normal, probably January, February, if things continue to recover. But, in a couple months, we could just be down 20%. So, I'd say like the nonprofit job market is rebounding faster than we expected or even hoped. And so everyone's probably giving you different advice about like the job hunt right now, but like I'd say like from what I can see, I think you should continue to keep applying. Like, I have a job alerts for Idealists on my email just to see how they're looking, but I'll get like 5-6 new jobs a day, in marketing anyway. So I wouldn't just like count it out or just think you just have to like sort of twiddle your thumbs until an opportunity comes up. So like set up alerts, keep scanning. It's not really the end of the world like you might think. And And yeah, there's still like a lot of great opportunities because, you know, even if as many new jobs aren't being added, people are still leaving their jobs and they still have to fill those vacancies. So I think that's something that people don't really talk about too, but there's always going to be that need as people continue to move on. And then it's just really only going to get better as time goes on. So it's obviously a really hard time to be looking, but I wouldn't count yourself out or count the nonprofit world out right now. It's my maybe biased opinion, but got the stats too. So happy to have shared those.
Yeah, Liz, oh, I thought I muted myself. Sorry. Yeah, Lizzie, it's great to actually hear those numbers. I think there's been so much speculation about what we think is happening or what we personally feel is happening. So it's really great to hear the numbers and also have a good understanding of the rebound and have some hope of what to expect as time continues to go on, especially for students who, you know, come next semester, so early 2021, might be looking for jobs in this sector or internships for their summer. So it's really encouraging to hear. Staying with that sort of positivity and encouraging note, are there any other either positive trends that anyone else sort of is experiencing or might think is coming, or really just positives that you're seeing about being in the workplace right now? I know we already talked about the embracing of remote and how accommodating our organizations are, but other positives that you're seeing coming out of everything going on right now?
I mean, I think from the education standpoint, I think it was great to see that there is alternatives to instruction. It's not just like the in-person setting that students can benefit from. Although we already knew that with different kind of online programs, but I feel like those sort of have like the perspective of like, those are only in case of emergencies, or like they're sort of frowned down upon, and sort of like everyone's stuck on the traditional, like you're going to be in the classroom and you're going to learn that way. But I think this has given us a great opportunity to see how students can benefit from different types of approaches when it comes to learning. So I think that'll only get better as time goes on.
From my perspective, I think that this has encouraged the trend of understanding folks more as full people. You know, so I don't have any children, but I'm a very proud aunt. And so acknowledging that with reduced access, you know, first an elimination to access to childcare, you have to acknowledge people as their full selves and their full commitments that they have in life. So, you know, one of the things that I've been able to embrace is I've gotten to see one of my nephews more than I ever would normally, because I take him once a month. And that's because with me working remotely, I have the flexibility to do that. And so I think acknowledging, you know, in my department, sometimes people are working core hours in the morning with less availability during like the middle of the day, and then additional like time in the evening. So folks schedules are looking really different. And that's because, you know, some of our staff, you know, are young parents. So they've got, you know, it's the difference between an infant, a toddler, you know, and upwards. So, you know, an 11-year-old is not a real heavy lift for me, but I also used to be a summer camp counselor. So there's a lot of part-time jobs that I've done over the years. And, you know, 11 years old is not going to be what stresses me out at the end of the day. But I can imagine if I was a young mother, like having time where during the core, you know, spaces that I need to be outside with my child, providing them stimulation, you know, safely, and, you know, supporting their gross motor skills, like being able to do that, and just very transparently maybe work like 7 to 9, have a shift, like working around that has been, I think, something that's brought in a lot of joy. I'm personally training for a charity bike ride in the fall. So my work break is about like an hour and a half bike ride, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I was at my downtown Boston office. You think I'm bike riding in downtown Boston? I know people do it, but you're not gonna find me doing it. So, you know, I take my little routes around JP safely in the bike lane, and, you know, I keep my P's and Q's. But that's been a real moment of joy. That would not be possible if we were not working remotely, if we were not all trying to take care of one another and social distance as best we could. So that's been a real moment of joy. It's feeling like people are acknowledged as more of their full selves, with regards to, you know, the commitments that they have outside of the 9 to 5.
I think building off that point, right, of the full humanity or the full person, I think if you're here, you're watching this, right, you're learning about social impact, education, nonprofits. These are things, pathways that are focused on building a better world. They're focused on justice. And I think this is, Lizzie's point earlier, right? I don't want to say it's a silver lining, because I know how real the pain is, both because of the pandemic, but also because of the work that people across this country are finally starting to do along with racial justice. I think this is an incredible opportunity for us to fundamentally rethink how we exist. How do we work? How do we take care of our children? How do we support those who have children? How do we educate the next generation? How do we ensure that people are not facing violence, discrimination, hatred? And that is an incredible, it's been invigorating to me to know that the work is not done and won't be done for a long time, but that this is something we all, and you all coming into this space, can help to move in a big way now. I think that people are hungry for it, and that people, like my organization, has been dragging its heels for years to declare itself an anti-racist organization, and finally has said it, put it out these words, and it's just the start. We can't get complacent in that, but I know a lot of other companies and people who work at those places are doing more than they have ever done. And that, again, it's just encouraging to know that we can keep walking, because there'll be more of you behind us pushing us to not get lazy, not get comfortable. Especially for me, as my identity, a white, straight, cis male who's got a ton of privilege, I better get out and keep moving. So that's what's positive for me in these times.
Yeah, just to add to that, a couple of months ago, I read a statistic that baby boomers and, Generation Z and millennials, when polled, they want the same things from work. They want to be seen as a whole human. They want flexibility. They'd love some wellness perks, but Generation Z and millennials are much more likely to ask than baby boomers. So it's kind of interesting. There's this idea that professionalism is sort of shedding who you are when you walk in the door, and just being focused, and sort of, in some ways, it sometimes can feel to me pretending you don't have these other responsibilities or these other sides to yourself. But I think the pandemic is really changing things, and even just sort of zooming out, right? Outside of the nonprofit world too, just with Target extended its paid sick leave, and now it's permanent for employees. Juneteenth is now a holiday that's being declared. I don't know, we're getting certain paid holidays off. I think there's sort of a huge shift in that employees are not just sort of a faceless mask, but we're all people, and we have stories, and we have loved ones. And it feels to me like a big cultural moment where we're changing the narrative there. And I think that is being driven by young people like yourself. So, it's an exciting time. And I think that people are really receptive to these changes that are being pushed. So I'm excited to see where we go with that too.
One of the questions we got a number of times from students participating today was about burnout, especially working in education, social impact spaces, and nonprofits, and especially at the beginning of your career journeys, where sometimes organizations expect more, or we just are younger and have more to give. Can a couple of you talk either about things you've shared about your own practice of not burning out, or how your organizations have been supporting you? Any lessons learned on burnout?
I would love to chime in first on this one, Cheryl, because I love this question. And I'm going to tell you why I love this question, because when I was at Tufts, I think minimum wage was $8 an hour. It makes me shudder to think about a time in life when I made $8 an hour, but that's capitalism, and that's a much larger conversation that we don't have time for right now. When I think about burnout, I think that the way I'd love to start this conversation, I'm going to be very concise and brief to the best of my ability, is that I want to ask everyone on this conversation, outside of work, do you know how to take care of yourself? And I ask that because I get roasted through my friend group all the time. Are you going to sleep at a decent hour? Because if you're up at 1 o'clock in the morning of course you're going to be tired by the time you go to work. And your job, just like anybody else in your life, is going to take from you as much as you are willing to give. And that is, I think the most true perhaps in the earliest stages of your career, because you are that fresh talent and you are that young person in the room. But just like anybody, if you want to give them an inch, they're going to want to take a mile. So do you know how to practice healthy boundaries with yourself? And so if you don't, then how are you going to be able to practice that in your job? Really just encouraging, you to come to work as your best self, your full self, but also acknowledging that if you don't take care of yourself, there's no way in which your employer is going to know how to support that. So it's going to sound really granular, but making sure that you have, I think, discipline. And this is coming from someone who I didn't used to think about myself as a type A personality, but my desk is immaculate. I come to work, I have my list, you know what I mean? I come home, my Christmas list is in an Excel sheet. It was then when I realized that I might have some type A tendencies when the Excel sheet during Christmas came out. But I say that all to mean is like, if you incorporate discipline, so that's my biggest takeaway. When you bring discipline into the work that you do, then you can be disciplined with yourself and you can help others support you in that discipline. So, something during quarantine, waking up every day, taking a shower and putting on work clothes. Like if I was to go out the door and prepare myself for the day, that mental cue, that habit that I'm building, that muscle memory, that steady schedule, that's what's bringing me to start my day on a successful note and hopefully end on a successful note. But that's also a way in which I'm taking care of myself. Because I think, maybe Vladimir could chime in on this, but we're seeing folks maybe declining in terms of taking care of their mental health. Those little pieces are what begins to fall. You see somebody looking like a schlub. You see them, not smiling like their normal self, perhaps. It's those little pieces of self-care that seem like boring, that really stack up and then manifest later. So bringing discipline and bringing self-care to the table is really, really important in protecting yourself against burnout, because if you're not looking out for you, how is anybody else going to? Now I'm off my soapbox, that's all.
Oh, I really love the way that you reframe that. I think really giving us all something to think about in terms of what are we really talking about when we say burnout, and who are we putting the onus on, and how are we thinking about what work means? Anybody have anything else you want to add to this topic?
I just think what Tatiana said about self-care is huge, and self-care can look like a bunch of things. It can be prioritization, time management, setting boundaries. I know for me, when I first started off as a school psychologist, my first year, I was afraid to say no to anything. So it was just really like, the teacher wanted this, the teacher was going to get that in the next hour. If the principal wanted this, they would get that in the next hour. And everything was like, request here, request there, and then I just wanted to just do it right away. But as I sort of went on in my career, I realized that you don't always have to say no, just like, oh, no, I'm not doing it. But there's different ways to sort of give yourself a little bit more time to get things done. Like, oh, not yet. Let me look into that and I'll get back to you. So, and me just sort of getting out of that mindset where like, I'm new, I had to prove myself and show that I can do all of this and do it the fastest. I had to really work my way out of that, because in the beginning it was just like every night I'd come home with like just work from home, just like extra work that I would do, and it would just like take away from like my week. I'd go back into work feeling like I never really took a break from what I was doing. So I think that's a skill that early on in people's professional lives they really have to sort of think about, because it's easy to just to get caught up in just being that person where like every time there's a request of you, you do it, and you just do it at their pace, but don't really take into consideration the time and sort of like the space you need in order to get it done to the best of your ability, and to be okay with sort of going to that person and either asking for more time or giving them a timeline as well. But I know that's something hard to do, especially with the power dynamics in work. You don't feel like you can say that to your boss or to your supervisor, but I think that's a skill that I'm continuing to work on as well. And I'm sure that when the students go out into the professional world, they'll feel that right from the start as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I actually had a similar problem when I started out too. So doing things immediately or just being afraid to like push back really in any way. But I've had this weird experience where since I've started doing it, I think I've gotten like really a little more respect from the people that I work with. And I didn't expect that at all. But like my last 2 jobs, I've had both of my bosses tell me like, thank you for taking a lunch break, and thank you for like making it signaling clearly when you're on a break. You know, I know how to take care of you as an employee, and I know you're going to bring like your full, like more rested self to work. And that totally blew my mind. But I think it's true. Like I'm a big reader, so I like make sure to read on my lunch break, or at least like take a walk outside. And I think you're just like kinder to people. You're a little more patient. I think it's really clear when you're working with someone who's sort of respecting their own boundaries. And I don't know, I think more people should do it if they're able to, and if they have a really accommodating workplace, which, you know, I think most do, especially in the nonprofit world. So I think it's a benefit of the kind of field you're looking into. But yeah, I think it is important to have that skill too. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a myth that when you graduate, you're just supposed to enter the workforce and just like grind constantly, and then you don't like come up for air until you're like 27. But it doesn't, that's what I thought anyway. I'm not sure where I got that idea, but it doesn't have to be that way. And you can have a life outside of work and take breaks during the day too. You know, you're not just your product. You're not just like an employee, and you have other parts to yourself. And yeah, don't forget that. I think that would be my advice too.
Real quick. I think with burnout, right? Because part of it is motivated about like what you're being asked of others, but it's also this internal thing, right? Especially in the social impact space, right? Like there's so much work to be done in this area. And I think a metaphor I've been using the past few months, which has helped me realize like I'm not the villain, right? There's like I can average resting breath rate, right? Like 12 to 18 breaths a minute. Like you're going to breathe 12 to 18 times a minute for the rest of your life. There's no, like, I can't sit here and get all those breaths done in this hour, right? Like I'm going to have to keep doing this every day for the rest of my life. And that's the same thing with all this stuff. Like it is an ongoing part of who you are to do this work. So like, remember that, and that it's not just about you. There's a lot of other people doing it too. So like, it's not all on your shoulders to get done today.
Yeah, great answers. I just want to ask the students who are here as participants, if you have any questions for one or all the panelists, go ahead and type in the chat box right now. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll try to get to your questions if you have any that we haven't addressed yet. So my last question for each of you is, for students interested in these industries, what do they need to know right now? What mindset should they have as they are either entering the workforce and still looking for a job right now, or maybe they're in the middle of their time at Tufts, but know they want to pursue a career in this path, and we're in this big global moment. What do I need to know right now?
Right, that's another very light question from Cheryl. Again, I'm going to aim to be brief and say that there is no perfect time, there is no perfect place, there is no perfect opportunity. Understanding, in my personal experience, a part of the reason why I got the job that I got now is because I did 3 years of volunteer work that I call heart work. Was associated with an organization and loved the work. It's a women's collective giving group. And that gave me the transferable skills that I could put on my resume to work for ComCore. So I could not have foreseen that unfolding. But what I did was a bit of Vladimir's advice from earlier. I paid attention to what I was passionate about. I invested my time there. And then I saw an opportunity, trusted myself, and went for it. So I can't put it more succinctly than that. You know, trust in what you know, be open, be agile, be ready to pivot, but also be sure that you're investing in your heart work as long as your heart work in tandem with your head work. Because like Paul said, there's so much to be done in the nonprofit sector, but you're not going to be useful to anyone if you are not acknowledging your own personhood, your own needs, your own wants, your own passions. So you have to be very conscious of who you are and what space you're trying to occupy. So that's all from me.
Yeah, I think in that vein too, yeah, just like, so I've been going to like some virtual like panels, not speaking, but attending on sort of like what the job market is like right now. And what I've heard HR representatives say is that it's just taking a little longer for them. Like because they're just busier during their day to day, and they also have more people applying for the jobs, right? So it's taking a little longer for them to like do that first HR interview and then to go through the process. So it might have taken 6 weeks before, might take 12. So I think just like knowing that, it's helpful to have other things going on outside of school or work or your job hunt that still bring you joy, and there's other parts of yourself that kind of give you a satisfaction too. So it's hard when you're just saying, okay, my life will really begin when I get this job or like I get this internship. I think it's just important to have other things that bring you some sort of satisfaction. And sort of in line there too, just like using this time to build skills, just like you're saying, Tatiana. Like I actually had a similar experience. I wasn't in the job that I wanted before this, and I started volunteering all around the city, and that experience got me this job too. So whether it's like, yeah, I know, it's great, right? And it was really fun. It was like a way for me to explore New York City when I was still pretty new here. So, I mean, you could use this time to get certifications while you're job hunting, like volunteer around the city. There are a lot of other ways to sort of build your career beyond just like applying for like that job. And hopefully, if you're doing the work that, is your heart work and brings you joy too, then the two can kind of combine. So yeah, just knowing it'll take a little while and using that time to, find your own joy and build your resume and in that way too.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to just know that, success isn't linear. You're going to be taking all these different zigs and zags to get to the point that you want to get to. And your success may look a lot different from somebody else's success. And to just be at peace with that. And just know that if you're continuing to strive for the goal that you set for yourself, if you see yourself making those steps each and every day, that's really what counts. Because a lot of people like to just go to the end goal, but don't really appreciate the steps and process it takes to get to that point. So it's really, during this time, it's given us all a chance to really slow down and really appreciate things on a day-to-day basis that we probably took for granted before COVID and the quarantine and everything. So you really want to be present and really just appreciate the work that it takes to get to your end goal, because you'll appreciate it a lot more when you get there.
I think the skill to work on, I think from my perspective, is relationship building and all the things that go into that: communication, empathizing, collaboration. Those are the skills I think of any nonprofit, education especially, but social change, social impact. It's all about the human connection, and that, I think, to Lizzie's point, it's something you can be working on outside of the job hunt, because you have friends, you have members of your community at Tufts, at home, in all over these different spaces. Like I think this sector, more than any other, like you get to live it 24/7 and express it in different ways. And I think remembering that is important, because it doesn't feel like work as much. Well, it does. And don't let people take advantage of you, but also know like those connections are what leads to everything. Everything is accomplished through our relationships with each other, and that's the key, I think.
Oh yeah, and just to say too in that line, I think there's a lot of sort of empathy for people who are in school right now or who are graduating. Like I'm on LinkedIn and they call it like the class of 2020, and there's a huge push among people who are like my age or older to support you guys through this time. So it seems like there's a lot of openness to, reaching out to someone for like an informal like interview or like a coffee chat or something. People are really coming forward and they want to do what they can. So I think you would be surprised if you make the first move. I think people would be more than willing to help out, or at least much more than you might expect. So don't discount that too.
I just want to chime in to say I love that remark from Lizzie. I was at a panel with Paul back in January, and a couple of students reached out to me afterward, and one actually followed up. I made time to have coffee with them, and we had a great conversation about his career and tips and things of that nature. So I always put that out to people, if you want to follow up, you got to follow through. And so I probably met maybe like 25 students that night, but one followed up, and he told me I had a really good conversation. Well, yeah, I'm a bit biased because I was the one having a conversation with him, but I'd like to think he wasn't lying to me. But, so out of 25, only one followed up, ball's in your court.
Great. Well, this has been, I want to end on that note because it was just really great, really wonderful, inspiring, and motivating, and encouraging. So we'll pause the conversation here for now. I just want to thank all of our students and young alum for tuning in, and an extra special thanks to our guests, Tatiana, Lizzie, Paul, Vlad. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us, to talk to the students and young alum, and share a little bit more about what's going on in your corner of the world these days. So thanks everyone for being here. For our students, we'll be posting the recording as soon as we have it edited and captioned, probably next week. You can see it on our YouTube channel, and as always, feel free to reach out to the Career Center. We'll be virtual for the semester for support, and leading up to it, we're here for you. You can always reach out to me individually at cheryl.rosenberg@tufts.edu. Hope everyone has a good rest of your week and continue staying safe and taking care of yourselves.
Thank you, Cheryl. We appreciate you getting us all together and being able to participate in this community.
Thank you all for joining us so much. That was really great.